Before this episode starts, I want to mention something new I'm offering. After more than 10 years studying hundreds of missing persons cases and speaking with nearly 1,000 family members, I've now started doing private consultations. This is not about theorizing or guessing. It's about stepping back and looking at a case objectively. What fits, what doesn't fit, and what seems most likely based on everything we know. If you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure what to believe anymore, that's where I can help. You can learn more or book a consultation at missingpersonsconsulting.com. Rex Lee Douglas was a 61-year-old from Boulder, Colorado. He was a married pastor who was a military vet. On January 30th, 1984, Rex was by himself in St. Louis and due to fly back to Colorado. He never arrived. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. We take all disappearances at Unfound. The ones with enough facts to fill an encyclopedia, remember those. To the ones with one short paragraph on the Charlie Project. We've gone to Wales, New Zealand, Malaysia. We featured a security guard who disappeared on the job. We've had a young man who was driving the wrong direction in Texas. In fact, we had a couple like that. We've had a woman whose house got burned, then her car was burned as well. We've even had a woman be abducted from a busy Michigan highway. And of course, we've even had a woman who lived for 45 years after she disappeared. I mean, at this point, you'd think you and we wouldn't be surprised by anything. Well, with Rex Douglas, we have a pastor who disappeared on a trip. But what was discovered after is going to make you say, holy smokes. And now a summary of the case. By all accounts, Rex Douglas was a mild-mannered, small-town pastor. He and his wife, who had no children, moved around from town to town, state to state, running small churches. There were no complaints about Rex, no sexual allegations, no fraud suspicions. He was a good guy. In fact, his background was equally impressive. Rex was a military vet. He attended Vanderbilt University. But like many people who become church leaders, Rex told people that he felt a calling to the profession even though he could have done other work. And at the time of his disappearance, his congregation believed Rex would be their head preacher for the foreseeable future. So, in late January of 1984, Rex by himself flew to Missouri. He and his wife had lived there, and the trip was to close up a small land deal. Rex also mentioned wanting to visit the headquarters of a church organization in the area. For unclear reasons, Rex pushed his return flight back to Colorado to January 30th. Yet, when the day came, Rex did not arrive back in Denver. He was never seen again. Over time, the police began to piece together the specifics of Rex's trip. They found that Rex had maxed out some of his credit card accounts for it. And while in Missouri, he went to Iowa, not telling his wife about this. Maybe most importantly, no proof could be found that Rex was ever in the U.S. military or that he went to Vanderbilt. His social security number wasn't real either. When analyzing disappearances, We often wonder if a missing person has gone off to start a new life. Yet we are hardly ever confronted with a situation where a missing person might have already been a missing person. Contemplate what the signs are that somebody may not be who he or she says, while you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, how did Rex get away with using a fake social security number for so long? Number 2, how sure are you that Rex planned his disappearance before he ever left Colorado? And number 3, if Rex Douglas was not really Rex Douglas, why would he have run off if nobody in his life knew he wasn't who he said he was? Rex has no family except for his wife, who seemingly accepted that he just left his life. The guest for this episode is the creator of the Lost and Found blogs, Heather Grotman. Unfound News. The newest Unfound Now is out. I take a look at the late February disappearance of Lee Longmire in Norton Heights, Michigan. Next, a reminder that Private Icon is not happening. It was supposed to be starting a week from now in Tennessee. I was supposed to attend, but it has been pushed back to a now unknown date. Finally, please send out your thoughts and prayers, if you believe in such things, to John Lorden. He has been diagnosed with cancer. I'm so happy to have back on Unfound, and in fact, she and I were talking about how many times has it been, 6 or 7. We're thinking it's 6, although it might be 7. Maybe this is number 7. A blogger and podcaster at the lostandfoundblogs.com, Heather Grotman. Heather, welcome back to Unfound.
Thank you, Ed. It's always a pleasure.
And certainly over a year, I think. And I think it's been March the last few years, and it's been because of a lot of things that I've had going on. We get in here into April, and I'm like, man, we just went through March, and Heather hasn't appeared. We're into April, and Heather hasn't appeared. So here you are, Heather. Good to have you.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this because I already had a case in mind.
You did. And in fact, you told me
Yes.
you told me about the disappearance we're going to be discussing today some months ago, right?
Yes, I didn't even have to look through my past articles. I knew.
Right. And Heather, you do have a reputation, at least in my mind, which is maybe the only mind that matters, that you do bring to Unfound some unique ones. Of course, you started out with Dale Kerstetter. And then, of course, we got around a couple years later to Chance and Dub Wackerhagen, where a little boy and his father go missing. Of course, there's an unsolved murder connected to that. And then last year, Kenneth Playstead, a guy who most likely ran out of his life because he was ripping somebody off. You really bring some special ones, unique ones to Unfound, Heather, and I really, really want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I try really hard to find obscure cases because, number one, they're interesting and people want to hear. And number two,
Yes.
They need attention. You know, some of these cases get lots of attention.
That's exactly true. True. But being that it's been over a year since you've appeared, how are things? I don't have to get too personal into this. How are things going for you? How's the last year been with your blogging, the podcast, your life? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Podcast is growing quickly. Very happy with the numbers.
Yeah.
I have a grandson named Aiden. He's 19 months old, and of course, such a fun age. So. Yes,
and is your daughter who had that child, and do you get to see them often?
Yes, they just live a few miles away. In fact, I saw him today at his tumbling class.
Oh, his tumbling class. I love it. All right.
19 months, they just run around and jump around on mats, basically, at this age.
That's probably good exercise for them. That's a great 18, 19 months old. That's a great time to be taking a tumbling class.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids are so flexible at that age.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yep, that's right.
Of course, we've gotten into your background before and everything, but we're just going to touch upon a few things. Of course, we have new listeners to Unfound. They're saying, well, who is Heather? Let's talk about how you got into true crime. What was your introduction? Do you remember the first, I don't care if it was a disappearance, murder, serial killer, or whatever, the first case that kind of caught your attention and introduced you to the world of true crime, something you stuck with to this day?
Yeah, I will never forget it because I was in third grade and we were learning about Amelia Earhart. Huh. And it's always been about missing people, not the true crime, but I was like, where is she? And I would tell my family, well, she's still alive. I think she would have been like 84.
Okay.
But, but I was convinced she was alive somewhere.
Oh, you were? Well, as I remember it, there was that conspiracy out there that there was some woman like in New York. Do you remember that?
Oh, no, I don't.
You don't remember that? All right, we don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but there was of course, the show that got me into true crime was In Search Of, and they did an episode where they tried to figure out if there was a woman, I forget, New York, New Jersey, who was actually her, that she actually had gone back to the United States and lived under a new ID, she started a new life for herself. You never heard that story?
Yeah, no, that sounds like In Search Of, but I actually love that show.
It does sound like In Search Of. Funny you should put it that way. Well, you can look that up after we're done here tonight. And by the way, everybody, we're doing this interview on April 21st of 2026. So it was Amelia Earhart, that mystery that got you into this.
Well, yeah, it kind of, got me thinking. I remember the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. I was really interested in that as well.
Right.
And then Unsolved Mysteries came along, the late 80s.
Yes.
So, of course, completely hooked on that show. Favorite show ever, will always be.
Right.
And my sister showed me this message board and they were asking questions and I have like total recall of the names of these segments a lot of times. Uh-huh. And I could answer a lot of the questions and eventually became moderator and moderated for over 10 years. Wow. Before I was done moderating, I decided.
Wow. Right. And you were a moderator. If you ever wonder, everybody out there who are the moderators of some of these forums that you go to, Heather Grotman did that for over 10 years.
Oh. Now, Ed, what was my screen name? I'm going to quiz you. Do you remember my screen name?
I don't remember you. I don't remember, no.
I am Crystal Dawn on the message board. So if you see that, that's me.
Right. Crystal Dawn. That's exactly right. And if I can ask, being involved in this like you were, is that just a volunteer position?
Oh, yes. I mean, the owner asked me, because I had a lot of knowledge, asked me if I wanted to moderate, but and it was great. I made a lot of great friends that I'm still friends with. But, of course, the headaches that come with moderating where people would argue about, differing opinions and stuff like that.
Right. So are we talking like early age of like starting in the 90s or was this into the 2000s or what were the years that you
It was into the 2000s, yeah.
It was. Okay, for over 10 years.
That's still an active message board too, so.
Right. Okay. So you get into that, and then suddenly that must have been interesting for you. Of course, Unsolved Mysteries, and then all of a sudden you're a part of it. Watching it and being a part of it.
Segments would actually post on there, and I would talk to them, and you kind of feel like you know them because you've watched them on the screen for years.
Right. That's right. Are there being that you became, such a fan of Unsolved Mysteries, and then, of course, you were a moderator there, any particular disappearances or episodes that stick out to you from either watching or moderating?
Well, moderating, there was the Mary Morris murder, where two women named Mary Morris were killed shortly, within a short period of time in the same town.
Yes.
And the segment profiled this a crazy coworker, as they profiled him. He actually sent me a message when I posted about, just my opinion, and he's like, I'm a coworker, I was framed. And I was like, wow. But as far as like how it got into first the blog, we would look up these old cases and we were curious what happened with them, because a lot of them didn't have updates. So we would do our own little digging, and we would come up with what happened. And I've always enjoyed writing, so it just kind of grew from there.
Right.
I wanted to be able to do deep dives on cases.
Right. Well, being that you were into unsolved mysteries and everything, I mean, was this a thing where you ever considered going into law enforcement? Maybe not actually a cop on the beat, but the FBI or something like that was ever consideration or not?
No, not really. Just kind of, enjoy doing it. Didn't really think of making it a career, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Same as me then. Same as me. Gotcha. And of course, within the last couple of years, you like you said, you liked all the writing and everything, but within the last couple of years, you've actually started doing a podcast as well. How has that added to your work? Has that added a lot more hours during the week that you have to put into it, or what?
Yeah, it definitely has added to my work, because like if I have a guest on, or my friend Clint has been on a few with me, I have to write a completely different ending for the for the blog, just kind of my thoughts. Okay. Whereas the podcast, him and I just talk about what we think happened. So, I mean, it's just a little bit of extra work in those. And of course, recording it and stuff does take some time, but it's definitely manageable to do both.
Right. Okay. And just, I know I've asked you this before, but we'll go over this again. How often do you publish your blog, and how often do the podcast episodes come out?
I try to every 2 weeks, and I usually always post an article form, but occasionally I don't. If it's like an interview and stuff, sometimes it just doesn't, I can't translate it well into article form. But almost all of the podcasts are in article form on the blog. Right. I'm getting ready to post number 70, so I'm getting a decent library of podcasts. Fantastic.
And so the recording that you do for the podcast goes along with the blogs, the articles that you post.
Yes.
So yes. When one of the blog posts or articles comes out, that's when you do a recording, audio recording.
Yes, because a lot of people just enjoy reading. I have a lot of traffic to my website where they're just reading the articles.
Right, and I can get that as a guy who does exclusively audio, except for when I write it the blog on Patreon, which is of course it's a paywall site. I can understand that some people maybe want to read, especially if things can get pretty technical, like we're going to be talking with Rex's disappearance, something like that. Maybe it helps for people to be able to read it and maybe slow everything down a little bit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, that's why we're here to talk about Rex Douglas's disappearance. We'll just start right here. Do you remember the first time you heard about Rex's disappearance? Was this one that was featured on Unsolved Mysteries at some point?
No, it's hardly been covered at all.
Wow.
I actually was searching. Sometimes I'll do like theme podcasts. I wanted to know about people that went missing from airports. Ooh. And I think I found like a short little Reddit thing about him, but I thought, wow, this is crazy. And then Sylvia Pettum wrote a pretty in-depth article about him. We could talk about her later. Okay. But that's just pretty much it. I mean, there's hardly anything. And of course, now when you Google him, my two articles will be, some of the main hits.
That's right. All right, that's interesting. So you were looking for cases involving disappearances involving airports, people who went missing from airports. Did you find quite a few? I know that we've covered at least one other one like that, but how many did you actually cover or find?
I can think of 3 just in the last couple of months that I've posted. Now, one was the Marjorie Dabney, and bless her heart, she was found. Okay. and not too far away. I think she maybe wandered there.
Okay.
And then Charlotte Loomis, who was supposed to be flying out to go back home and was never seen again. Mm-hmm. And then I just released one about Clarence Banks. He disappeared right before he was going to pick up a $40,000 insurance settlement check. And his car was found in long-term parking at the airport.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, at least one of those, I think, maybe is familiar to me as far as name goes. And I know some years ago now, at least 5 years ago, I covered the disappearance of a woman. Her car was also found at the airport. And her story, she told her family she was flying to Israel to get married. And of course, the problem was that she wasn't Jewish and and she wasn't in a relationship and she didn't have a passport.
Wow.
But her car,
it was amazing in the 80s how many cars being found at the airports that I came across.
Yeah. And you wonder if that is as common these days. Of course, with all the video and everything, I'm guessing it's not as common, but I have no statistics to back that up. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's not as common. I mean, back then, we still don't know who put Clarence Banks' car there. It probably wasn't him, but, cameras would tell exactly who drove it there and who walked away from it.
Right. That's interesting. That's why, as I stated, you bring to Unfound some unique cases. Now we know why. You're looking for disappearances connected to airports. Now we know why, right? Right, Heather?
My Google history would make no sense to anybody else because I'll just Google a few words together to see what hits I get and such.
And, of course, Rex's disappearance is connected to an airport, as everybody will eventually find out, of course. So you came across this. How long have you known about Rex's disappearance now?
I would say probably summer of last year.
Okay.
Because I released the podcast in October of last year.
Okay. So not quite a year then.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking about that same question myself in my, all the reading that I do about disappearances. I have probably come across his disappearance at one time or another, but really not sure. I wouldn't want to bet a lot of money on that. So maybe we should go through that. Just in general, you do seem to have a knack of finding unique disappearances. That's what you're looking for. Of course, you brought, Christy Nichols was another one. I don't know how unusual that one is. Nylene Marshall, a little girl goes missing. I don't know how overtly unusual that one is either, but certainly Dale Kerstetter, Kenneth Plaisted, the Wackerhagens, etc. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for those, like maybe we might call offbeat or unique ones.
Yeah, but 4 of the 5 you mentioned, they're all unsolved mystery segments. Okay. So I've heard about them for years now. Okay,
gotcha. All right. So in preparing to eventually, of course, make, you did this long, part 1, part 2 on Rex's disappearance. What lengths did you go to? What sources do you use? Not just with Rex's disappearance article, but maybe some of the others. What are the common sources you're using?
A lot of times it's just the newspaper archives. I mean, sometimes there's decent enough coverage, and I'll look on even like Reddit and stuff. Sometimes, you get little nuggets there and stuff. So sometimes that's enough. If I don't have a lot, that's why I do the compilation episodes, like with Rex, it was going to be clumped with a few others, but I just got so much eventually. It was 2 parts for just him.
I see. Okay. All right. So newspapers.com, I guess you're a frequent visitor there as an example.
Yes. Many clippings. Yes.
Yeah. Got to have a subscription to newspapers.com, right?
In our business, you really do.
Got to have it. Absolutely got to have it. And I'm guessing maybe you also have a subscription to like some kind of database where you can put in people's names and something like that.
Not really. I mean, maybe on and off, but not continually.
Okay.
Sometimes I've had like the white pages just to look up,
Right.
contact info. Yeah.
Right. And what about FOIAs? If you were to break down, start talking about overall, and of course you have a ton of information for Rex's disappearance, and everybody should know we're just going to kind of hit the high points on Rex's disappearance. Certainly, I want everybody to go to Heather's site, the lostandfoundblogs.com, to see all the very, very detailed work she did on Rex's disappearance. But how often do you find yourself taking the time, maybe being patient, as you have to be, like with FOIAs and things like that? Is that a big part of your work or not?
Well, I hardly ever do it. And it's not, I think they're a great resource, but I usually just figure, they're not going to give me anything, or
right.
They're going to say, well, we don't want you to do this case because it's, it's open. They like to say it's open 30 years later.
They do.
But this case, I thought, why not? And then they told me, and I was talking to my friend Mike, and he's a former PI. They basically told me they had something for me, and it was going to be, like 100 some pages. And he's like, well, man, that's going to be worth it. They've got something.
Right.
Because we thought this was just a bare bones disappearance. There wasn't much to it. So, I paid, $20 some. It was worth it for all the information.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I don't normally do. And then my friend Clint worked recently on the Perman Gilbert case, and they sent us the police file, and we were completely shocked.
Wow. Okay. So when you say you got this information for Rex's disappearance, who exactly did you get it from?
It was, I believe, Boulder County.
Okay.
And, it's confusing because he went missing, not where he lived. And
right.
So that made it confusing.
He did not. And so is this a situation, so you actually did contact them, just kind
submitted a record
poking around?
And it only took, a week or two.
Wow. Well, that was nice of them. That's so unique, right?
And in fact, we've sent in a FOIA to the FBI, and they didn't deny it. They just said they've assigned somebody to work on it, but they've said that for months now. So,
okay.
I'll have a part 3 if we get the FBI files on this case.
All right, that might be interesting as well. So, by my calculations, so you found out about it last summer. Comes out in October, so you worked on it for maybe 3 months.
Yeah, and sometimes you just kind of set it aside because you want to get more content out there, and you just kind of pick it back up, and you wait to see if we can. There's so many rabbit holes in this case. You just hope that you can find out more before you finish the podcast.
That's certainly true. You're right about that. I'm wondering, of course, I have done this, but have you ever done this? What would you say the average amount of hours? Would you say, woman hours, I guess you might call them, do you put into, bringing one of your articles to the public? Have you ever even tracked that?
No, I think a lot of them would just be a few hours because if it's an unsolved mystery segment, I already am really familiar, but right. I did more research on this case than any case, by far, because it was like personal. I so wanted to know the answers to this mystery.
Right, for Rex's, right. Yeah. Well, once again, these things being that we do, very, very similar work, I always like to pick another writer's or podcaster's brain about their process. Even though, of course, we've known each other for several years, I still find it interesting to talk to you and ask you questions about your process. And everything. So thank you. I
also follow a lot of missing person type Facebook, and if there's an interesting case, I'll just screenshot it, and I have a folder in my images called possible cases.
Yes. Right. Good. Okay. Interesting. Well, we are here to talk about Rex Douglas, and let's just give the listeners a general idea about his biography. Of course, we're going to come back to some of these things later. But as far as what was accepted about his background before he went missing, maybe you want to talk a little bit about his family. Did he have any kids? I know he talked about his military record, education. As far as before he went missing, what did people think they knew about Rex Douglas?
Well, I was really fortunate because there's actually a newspaper interview with Rex himself from, I believe it was the early 1967.
Wow.
So he tells exactly what happened. You know, he said that he graduated from high school in Tennessee in 1940. He enlisted in the Army and served till 1945. He was in the military police. And then he attended Vanderbilt University in Nashville for 2 years. Then he left school, worked construction. After a year, he went back into the Army during the Korean War and served in the MPs in the New York area. Then he got out after 2 years and went to Vanderbilt for 1 more year. I spent the next 5 years in Des Moines. And then, so he led a busy life, according to him, the first few years.
Okay. Do you remember why was he being interviewed? Because of his pastor work, or was it something else?
Yeah, it says, let's chat with the Reverend Rex Douglas.
Let's chat. Okay, and then that's what they did. All right, so that's his bio. Seemingly, of course, we're talking about the 1940s. I think we have to think World War II vet, maybe. And then went back, Korean War vet, Vanderbilt, of course, very prestigious school, even to this day, here in the United States. And eventually he got married. And, we don't necessarily maybe have to get in how he met his wife, but did they have any kids? How long were they married before he went missing? Maybe a little bit about his, his social life.
Actually, the last question is, how did you meet your wife?
Okay.
So her father was a retired Nazarene minister, so he met through the church, and her name was Ruth, and they got married in, I believe, 1962. And by all accounts, she's an absolutely lovely woman.
Okay. So they got married, but they never did have any children.
Correct. And I guess they were married for about 22 years when he disappeared.
Right, in 1984. Okay, that's exactly right. And, of course, like you said, he became a pastor. The way that you would describe his work as a pastor, the church, etc., is this like a mainstream type of church? Is this kind of a smaller sect? Is it, of course, comparing like the Catholic Church maybe to some small denomination of Christianity? How would you describe the kind of pastor work he was doing?
Well, I'm not sure how devoted he was to one, particular type, but it was Church of the Nazarene, for several years. But then in Lyons, it was an Old Stone Congregational Church.
Okay. And so this is something legitimate. Of course, we know about there can be shady sects of all sorts of religions and everything else. This is something that was mainstream, not some sort of Christian cult or anything like that.
Yeah, we're not cult, yeah.
Right. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. It wasn't some sort of somebody doing this in their basement or something.
No, and I think there was about 80 people in the congregation.
All right.
In Lyons.
All right, so not big though.
Right.
80 in a congregation. I come from the world of Catholicism, although I haven't practiced that for decades. But of course, you talk about 80 people in a congregation. To a Catholic, that sounds pretty small.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I do have to tell everybody, if anybody out there is thinking, well, Church of the Nazarene, man, that sounds familiar. Coincidentally, that is the church that Steve Pankey got, the same denomination that Steve Pankey got kicked out of in the early 80s. And that is the same denomination where the Matthews went to church in Greeley, Colorado. And I've already run this by Heather, and the next time I write a letter to Steve, I'm going to have to ask him about that. I did bring that up to you, correct, Heather?
Yes, you're going to see if he knew Rex Douglas.
I'm going to ask him about that and see, of course, Steve has all his crazy ideas about the Church of the Nazarene, so this is probably just going to add to it. But I think I have a responsibility to asking him about that. I'm thinking it's just a coincidence. But we should note that Rex and his wife, even though he went missing in Missouri, they lived in Colorado.
Yeah, the last several years they had. Yeah, they bounced around quite a bit between a few different states.
Right. And of course, Steve, when Janelle went missing, Greeley, Colorado, Steve was in Colorado. So I don't know what we're cooking up here, Heather. I don't know. Maybe these are a bunch of facts looking for a conspiracy or something. I don't know.
We're just conspiracy theorists, aren't we?
Okay. Yeah. I try to avoid that. But overall, of course, you got, you in the public, you've gotten to know Rex maybe as well as anybody, being that you devoted all this time to putting your article together. How would you say what people thought of Rex Douglas, his reputation as a man, as a pastor, as a community member? What can you say?
Well, it's really from what I read, because I did reach out to some people at Lions, and they were all very nice, but they just, it kind of sounds familiar, because it was, 40 years later I'm asking them about this. But they were all really curious to read this article to find out what I found out. Mm-hmm. But, I know at the time of the disappearance, the people in the church thought a lot of him. And he, of course, were really concerned about his well-being when he disappeared.
Okay. So it seems like he was respected.
Yes.
The people in the community knew him. No allegations of any funny business going on before he went missing. Missing money or anything like that.
Correct.
If people are giving to the church and, he's spending it on strippers or something. Nothing like that.
No.
Okay. All right. So this is what he's doing. Him and his wife running this small congregation, Church of the Nazarene. And what city was this in Colorado?
It was in Lyons.
Colorado. Mm-hmm. Any idea where that even is? South, north,
I don't
east,
think
west?
it's too far from. I think it's pretty close to Denver.
Is it?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And I think maybe did I read something that they might have had a connection to Colorado Springs or something like that? Did I?
I believe they lived in Longmont for a while.
Okay.
Earlier in their marriage.
All right, because I guess I did look. I think this up. A while ago. I think Greeley, of course, is north of Denver. I think the area that we're talking about, Colorado Springs, Longmont, I think is south of Colorado. But I'm going to be really creeped out if that turns out to be wrong and the cities are near each other. That's really, because he goes missing in 1984. That's the same year that Janelle Matthews was murdered.
Yeah.
Wow, that is wild. Okay. So let's, of course, while we're here is the disappearance. And we're just going to stick to the highlights. It's a very complicated disappearance for everybody. Heather, please go through him going to Missouri for what reason? What was he doing there? And eventually it seems he went to Iowa for a little bit. Just do the best you can giving the people an overview of that.
Well, all they really said was I think it was the end of January, that he was going to do a land deal. That was all that anything said. It was a land deal. And the Lyons police chief even went on to say, well, we don't need to release any more information. It was a land deal.
Huh.
So I was curious to find out more about this land deal just because they were so cryptic about it.
A land deal. So they live in Colorado, and he and his wife owned some land somehow in Missouri. Did they live there at one time or before he got married? Do we know?
Well, I eventually found out in 1980 they bought, I believe it was 20 acres of undeveloped land. And according to his wife, they had thought about retiring there. But due to Rex's sinus issues, they weren't going to be able to. So they were in the process of selling the acreage.
Okay, so that was the understanding. He was going there to facilitate the sale of this land. So they only owned this land for a few years, like 4 years.
Right, and then it occurred to Rex, I guess, that he had sinus issues and he couldn't retire there.
Right, gotcha. All right, so he goes there, and he was supposed to be there for approximately how long? A week? 4 days?
Yeah, just a few days. I think he extended it a little bit, and I believe that, it was going to be February 1st, and he told his wife, another day or so, because I believe he kept in contact with her and had even mailed her things. I mean, he's gone a couple of days, but yet he mails her things while he's in St. Louis.
Those were the days of not emailing people. Okay. And, any reason that his wife didn't go with him? Maybe she had a job or something? Any reason that you can find the two didn't go together?
They never really say. I mean, I do believe she taught on and off, but I don't know whether that was something that he normally did. He just I think she was just the dutiful pastor's wife, and she didn't ask too many questions.
Okay. So this was not church business. This was his personal business.
Yes.
Okay. And, all right, so he's going there. Seems pretty legitimate to me, pretty straightforward.
Well, they did say at the time that it was a completed land deal. Like, it didn't have anything to do with that.
Okay. All right, so he goes and does this, in retrospect, once his wife was questioned about this after he went missing, did she seem to have any suspicions about it? Suspicious of it at all?
No, she was just more concerned, She was just worried about him.
Okay. Now, though, while he was there, he did, though, go to Iowa, right?
Yes.
Okay.
He was quite the little traveler there for a few days, and we still don't know why he went the places that he went. And it was all just short trips.
Uh-huh.
And he did procure quite a bit of money before he left.
Right. Maybe talk a little bit more about that, this money thing.
So on January 24th, just one day before his trip, he got 2 different cash advances of $500 each from credit cards, and then $200 each twice over, like 4 times, cashed 3 money orders that were made out to him. And so within 3 days, he'd withdrawn over $3,000 in various ways, which would be about the equivalent to around $9,300 by today's standards.
Huh.
That's just for a short business trip.
Right. And it should be clear he was taking an advance on credit cards. So this was technically money he didn't have. Right.
And we don't know what Hostic is, because the money orders, they were for $329, $450, and $450. So substantial money orders. But it was from Hostic.Inc. So we don't know who that is.
Maybe you could spell that for everybody. And
Hostec.
Hostec.
Yeah, all capital letters.
All right. And over 40 years later, seemingly nobody has any idea what that is.
Right.
Wow. Okay. And I'm guessing, Heather, obviously you're a great researcher. Not any instinct into what this could be at all. Nothing.
No, I mean, I may have found a hit on the newspaper archive, but nothing to explain what it was, or who could have,
all right,
been the president or whatever.
Okay. And so he's going to do this land deal, but like you said, while he's there, he took a plane from St. Louis to Kansas City.
Yeah, I believe Salem was part of it too, and he talked to his wife about. He thought about going to the Nazarene headquarters, which I believe is in Kansas City.
Oh, okay.
And she said that would be a good idea, if you want to spend a little bit more time there. But when they asked, nobody has any memory of him ever coming there. Go to the, I guess it's like a big headquarters.
Okay. All right, so your impression, once again, you've become the expert on it. I just have to ask you, does it seem to you that maybe this trip, he did do these transactions, right? The land transactions, those did happen, right? That did happen.
Right, and I talked to the person, that was part of the transactions, and because there was speculation that maybe he wanted it all in cash. He wanted it all in cash, this transaction.
Okay.
But I found the deed, and I was fortunate enough to talk to the woman, and she remembered. She said, "Yeah, it was property. We used it for camping," and said we maybe put $1,000 cash. And the rest were to be made in payments mailed to Rex's house. So, and according to Ruth and her sister, these payments were made out to Ruth. So it's like he's kind of getting everything ready. He's making sure that Ruth is getting a monthly payment on this land. Okay. He actually mailed her the paperwork. He's supposed to be home in a few days, but he mails her the paperwork. And someone even thought he may have even mailed her some money while he was on his trip.
Huh. So you could say, if we wanted to look at it a particular way, that maybe he knew he wasn't going back to Colorado. Just maybe.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, looking at his travels and everything, would you say that this ended up being a little more than a land transaction trip, being that he went to Kansas City, being that he went into Iowa, it ended up being a little bit more than that, but we don't know what he was doing for those other things.
Right, and the big question is he also went to Fort Leonard Wood, and nobody knows why or who he would have known there. And Ruth had no idea of anybody he would have known there.
And we know this because of what, credit card receipts or something like that?
It was mentioned in most of the articles, and I believe it was even mentioned in the police file, just that he went there.
Okay. So maybe, once again, maybe even told, maybe I'll ask you this. Being that he was doing these things, was she aware that he went to Iowa? Did he tell her, yeah, I'm in Iowa?
I don't know that he told her, but she did say that he talked like he might want to go to the headquarters.
Right. All right. So
of Nazarene Church, which was there. And I mean, he had a lot of little businesses going on, and Dave Tiefenthaler was one of the last people that saw him. He said that he and Rex were selling firewood from Rex's property, and they were trucking it to Colorado. So he had all kinds of little things going on.
All right, so he had even though he was a pastor, he had all these kind of side things, land and logging and stuff.
Yeah, and Ruth even said you can't, build up much of a nest egg because they wouldn't stay in any place for very long. There were always small churches, and they would stay 1 to 2 years, and then they would move on. Right.
He wasn't, as we might think in 21st century terms, he wasn't Joel Osteen.
No.
With a big congregation living in a mansion and all that.
No, and she even said that her husband was impulsive, and she soon learned that the minister makes all of the decisions, not the wife.
Right. Okay. So he goes there to seemingly do this land transaction, but then he says he's going to go check out these headquarters and, they talk, these things. It just seems to me that these were other things that he planned to do before he got, that were on his agenda that maybe he didn't tell his wife about before he went there.
Right, and see, I don't know whether maybe he traveled regularly and maybe he didn't tell her exactly what was going on. And so that could have even been normal for them. I'm not sure.
Okay. So then he was supposed to come back a particular day. Then he changed his mind. He pushed the flight back.
Yeah, he told her that he would return on February 3rd. Mm-hmm. But they were able to tell that his credit card usage stopped January 30th. So somebody was there at the airport to pick him up. I believe it was the Denver airport.
Okay.
But, Rex was nowhere to be found.
All right, so he's supposed to come on a particular plane. Somebody is waiting, and he never arrives.
Correct, and I believe the next day she reported him missing. Right, and they even called people that they knew, because they lived in Des Moines for a while. Mm-hmm. And they called everyone that they knew back then, and nobody had seen him on this trip.
Okay. Now, regarding this, the boarding pass that he should have been picking up, I guess, at the airport in St. Louis, it seems there maybe is a little bit of a discrepancy. Did it get picked up? Did it not get picked up? What can you say about that?
See, the few newspaper accounts say it didn't, but I specifically in the police file, I'll read what it says verbatim. TWA records show that Douglas was scheduled on a flight from St. Louis to Denver on January 30th, and that he picked up a boarding pass, but was not on the flight when it arrived in Denver. But I'm curious how they knew that he wasn't on the flight when it arrived in Denver, because back then they weren't really keeping track.
Right.
Is it just the fact that no one, he didn't wait around for someone to pick him up, and they said, oh, he must have not been on the flight.
Right. Right, a lot of different back in 1984 compared to getting on a jet today.
Yes.
Right. Vastly, vastly different due to technology, and of course, and security and everything else. I guess it is at least plausible that maybe he did get on the flight, flew to Denver, and just avoided being picked up.
Yeah, just got a rental car and hightailed it out of there.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So we have to be open to that. If anybody's wondering, we have to be open to the idea that maybe just because he didn't get picked up in Denver doesn't mean he actually flew back to Denver. But all we know is he was supposed to be in Denver, and he is never seen again. Very well may be, though, that he disappeared from St. Louis, but we have to be open to the idea he disappeared in Denver. All right, you said that she filed a missing persons report the next day. What can you say about that initial investigation? Did police take it seriously? Was there cooperation between police departments in Colorado and Missouri? Who does it seem, became responsible for all of this? What can you say about all that?
Well, I believe Lyons, Colorado, they pretty much took the helm of all of this, but, they were at a disadvantage, of course. I don't think the airport police were helpful at all. I mean, they didn't seem to want to do anything. Now, I spoke with Bob Rogers. He was on the police force in Bridgeton, Missouri, where Rex was last seen because he checked out of his hotel there. And he was great. He just didn't really remember a whole lot, but yeah, so they did as best they could, Lyons. So I don't really think it was a really intensive, long, investigation, because at the time it was just, he probably met with foul play. And you couldn't track him like you can now. All they could do is maybe check his credit cards. The last place they knew he was is when he checked out of his hotel
in St.
Lambert.
In St. Louis.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, and you did say it was airport police. It wasn't the St. Louis City Police. It was actually, they have a police force for the airport.
Yes, and I did records requests on all of those, and they just, no, we don't have anything, But, believe Babcock was the last name of the Lyons police chief. She tried to get the airport police to do a, comprehensive search, and they didn't really seem to be that interested.
Okay, so it seems it's, as I've brought up before, kind of a hot potato situation. I don't want to take it, you take it. I don't want it, you take it. As far as we know, he got on the plane and went back to Denver. Why are you bothering us with this?
Right.
Could be.
We have enough to worry about.
That's right. And, of course, we're going to get to this suitcase that was eventually found. We'll get to that in a moment. As far as the investigation, at least from the Colorado side of things, obviously his wife was questioned. What about, church officials, friends, your articles that you found, who else got involved in this? And we should state, going back to his biography, that he was always, he said his parents were dead. He didn't own up to having any brothers or sisters or anything, correct?
Correct. He said his grandparents raised him. He
did. Okay, so if anybody's thinking, well, couldn't they track down his family? Well, he's saying that he didn't have any family. What about questioning people who saw him in Missouri from the Colorado police ever Were they able to track down some of those people in Missouri and talk to them? What do you know about that?
Well, one of his business associates was David Tiefenthaler, and we tried to, and he did not want to speak with us because he's like one of the main people that actually interacted with Rex in St. Louis.
Huh.
And then we found out later he was actually the realtor who handled this land deal.
Huh.
So he was Rex's realtor, apparently. And so they had some business doings together, but that's really the only person that I've ever, heard that actually talked to him. And so I believe he talked to the police, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, he mentioned something about the suitcase, which we can talk about now or later.
All right. Just want to make clear. So he was, this real estate guy was talked to back in the 1980s, but you're saying he's still alive now and didn't want to talk about it.
Right, and Sylvia Pettum that did the deep dive, she actually got a hold of him, and he actually answered, seemed kind of put off, but did answer a few questions. He just doesn't seem to want to be involved or be helpful in any way about this.
Right, and we have to remember that's 42 years ago, and he can't be a youngster anymore.
Yeah.
Right, and maybe he has been asked about it before. Maybe he's just talked out of talking about it.
I would just love to say, what happened to Rex? What do you think happened to Rex?
Right. Just something simple as that, right. That's exactly right, even if it's just something like that. We're not alleging that this particular guy knows what happened. Just doesn't want to talk. And it very well just could be, who knows what that guy's going through in his life.
Yeah, and he seemed to cooperate with the police initially. He did answer all of their questions.
Okay. Well, all right. So we have this pastor, seems like a good guy, and goes to Missouri, land deal, just supposed to come back, something seemingly very simple, but of course he doesn't return, and then upon further investigation, we find out that he, went to Kansas City and went into Iowa, although maybe they were, he and his wife had lived there before, and these could be some things that maybe his wife didn't know he was doing, just possibly. And then we can't forget about all this money that seemingly he took out of the bank or got, it seems like he stocked up in cash before he left, correct?
Correct. And it always stuck with me that they lived in Des Moines, Iowa for a long time. And he actually goes there on this last weekend. So there's a specific reason that he went there. We just don't know what it is.
Right. Okay. So we have to just remember, so he went to Des Moines, but he had lived there before, so it's very possible that maybe he had a reason to go there that was personal, that maybe his wife didn't need to know about. I guess it's possible. Me not being married, what do I know about telling your spouse what you're going to do and what you're not going to do? All right.
Well, it's a whole different level when it's a pastor's wife,
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. All right, so once again, the money withdrew cash from a variety of places. Of course, you've done this a long time, Heather. Of course, even going back to your days of moderating and Unsolved Mysteries. Do you find this cash stuff suspicious or not? Taking the disappearance out of it, do you find it suspicious or not?
Yeah, it would be suspicious, but to me, I just feel like it was part of his plan. It's like a logical step if you're going to walk away. Get as much money as you can to bring with you.
Okay. Because I would say my perception is, I have it written in the outline that we're following, is, it's more money than I would expect a small-time pastor to have access to. What do you think?
Right, and I feel like he had his hand in so many things, and I wonder if Ruth even knew about those credit cards.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's no allegations that they were in debt or anything. Did that come up? How was their, not the church finances, but their personal finances? Any allegations they were having trouble making ends meet?
No, she just, had mentioned that you can't really, get a nest egg saved up. So that tells me they didn't have any kind of substantial savings or anything like that. And a lot of times, the church will pay for the parsonage and all of those expenses.
That's right. Right. All right. So we have this money situation going on, and maybe this explains why he was talking about logging and selling this land and everything else. You know, you put it in that context, maybe it's not that unusual.
Yeah, like I said, we don't know half of what went on
Right.
when he went to St. Louis that weekend.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to this. We're going to get to the suitcase, but his background. At what point, how soon, if it was like a week later, month later, year later, whenever, when did it start to become obvious to people maybe he wasn't telling the truth about his military background, his education? How soon did that come up?
I don't think that came up soon at all. And I was going to say, not long after he went missing, his church hired a PI to investigate, which I thought was strange.
Okay. Because
there was no mention of any money. And the PI in 6 months, he couldn't find anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see anything suspicious, anyone being suspicious until I got the police file, and it doesn't even begin till 2010.
All right, well, let's talk about that, the police file. And it wasn't until 2010 that it might have been discovered that he had lied about some of his background?
Yeah, because Detective Ainsworth just kind of went about trying to verify the things that Rex had told about who he was and everything. And so that's a big part of the police file, is him trying to just verify anything that Rex Douglas said about himself, if it was true.
And what did he find?
He found, really, we can't verify one single thing. That entire newspaper article of his biography, there's not one bit of truth in any of that. He's even given 2 different birth dates. They've got him on paper on a bank application where he wrote a certain birth date, and it was 2 years different than the birth date that he told his wife of 22 years that he had.
Same day, same month and day, but different year.
Yes. I believe it was always around December. And yeah, he listed it on the bank as 12/22/24.
Wow. And
on the marriage certificate, he mentioned he said it was his parents as Randall Douglas and Sarah Roberta Lee. And on this blood bank card, on the back, he wrote grandparents James Randall Douglas and Sarah Lee. So I don't know whether he's trying to remember who his grandparents are. So he's got a little cheat sheet there on the back of the blood bank card.
Okay. All right. So, but military, no proof that he said, like you've already stated, was involved until 1945, went back into the Korean War. No proof of that.
No, and in fact, he told his wife he was in the Air Force. And in that interview, he said he was in the Army. But he had all that figured out because he told her that many military records had been destroyed in a fire, and it was possible that it no longer existed.
But I did remember
the military records are burned up.
Right, but then I read also in your coverage that there were records that were born, but not the records that would have included his file.
Yeah, Detective Ainsworth said if it was the Air Force, the fire destroyed the records after the last name of Hubbard. So if Douglas really was his last name, his record should still be there. But military records are tough anyway.
They are.
But they couldn't.
Right.
Even the detective could not find any military records to verify anything that he said.
Wow. Okay.
But he did tell his wife. He just kind of made the cryptic comment that he didn't show up somewhere he was supposed to.
Yeah.
And she asked him about going AWOL. He said no, he didn't go AWOL.
All right, he didn't get dishonorably discharged. Right. Whatever he did, he says, kind of just brought his military career to an end. But he says he was not dishonorably discharged.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, what about his social security number? Once again, is this something that was not discovered until within the last 15 years?
I don't believe so, because, that's one of the first things Detective Ainsworth did. And the Social Security came forward and said that was not a valid number. But then also, and this is one of the most intriguing parts of the whole story, Ruth just happened to be going through Rex's things, and she found a IRS triplicate form sent from the IRS office to Rex from August of 82, so 2 years before he went missing.
Yes.
And it was titled Request for Verification of Social Security Number on W-4 form. So it was almost like they caught wind that this wasn't, a valid Social Security number.
Right. And then he goes missing, 2 years later. But sometimes these things take a while to process.
Yeah, the walls were closing in. And I really think a big part is, what was coming up, Social Security. And you have to verify who you are, a valid Social Security number, or then his whole story would have blown up if this is all a made-up story.
But I'm wondering, Heather, of course, you and I both know about, of course, a lot of people who changed identities. Of course, maybe a very famous one, Lori Ruff from Pennsylvania. She ended up starting a new life, ended up committing suicide in Texas, and it wasn't until after she was deceased that they found out, that she wasn't who she said she was. But, you would have to file, even if you're a pastor, you do have to file taxes. And of course, he had been working, it sounds like, these different churches and everything else. Would it really take that long for them to figure out he wasn't using a real Social Security number? What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure that he was getting, I think he could have gotten paid under the table. I mean, maybe the church just covered all their expenses. And then, he did construction. That could have definitely been a cash business. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure, I think a lot of the money that he got could have been, not documented.
Okay. So what you're saying is, let's just go back to the time that he got married in 1962. And let's just say that he was working some jobs those 22 years until he went missing. What are the odds that he would never have had to have used his Social Security number over those 22 years?
Right. And maybe he just put it down and it just wasn't verified, but he could have used a few different ones. Now, I've also wondered if, back then sometimes there would be like an infant that died and they would take over the identity. It was really easy to get Social Security number back then. Right.
So the Social Security number issue, of course, it's a huge deal. That they discovered. Of course, it wasn't until the last 15 years that they discovered it was fake. Then the question is, well, is he using that same fake number all those years? And, at some point he had a real one. Why wasn't he using his real one anymore? But also, it's like, well, did he really not file taxes and all these things for 22 years? It seems unlikely, but maybe that's the way it was.
Maybe that was the reason. Maybe the IRS was going to come after him for taxes that he wasn't paying.
Okay. All right, so we have his fake. So we have this military record, not verifiable. His attendance at least Vanderbilt University, people went to great lengths trying to find him in the yearbooks or whatever else. Nothing. At least under.
And I even called Vanderbilt University. And they searched, and there was no one by that name anytime in the 40s that attended there.
Right. And I'm just wondering, I'm not here to give you work, Heather. I'm wondering if, surely they have a library with all their yearbooks or whatever they do. I wonder if you could go back to the 1940s or something and start looking through those books and try to find a guy that looked like Rex.
We've been down that rabbit hole. I've looked at
You've done
many
that.
side by sides to see if it could be Rex, like an older version of Rex.
Right. Okay. So you did try to do that, unsuccessful.
Yeah, not so much Vanderbilt, the yearbooks, but just people with similar names. Just kind of look at them. You think this could be Rex, but Rex was 61 when he disappeared.
Right.
So he wouldn't look a lot different, I don't think, as he got older.
Right. Well, once again, it's on my mind. Like I said, I'm not here Maybe we have a listener from Vanderbilt University or lives near there or something. It might be interesting once again to go to their archives and just start looking at people. Start looking at the men. Of course, they're going to have pictures from like fraternities or something. And try to see, is there anybody in those pictures that looks like Rex Douglas? And if so, what is that guy's name? Just, just an idea throwing out there. All right, so military record fake. At least no Rex Douglas having gone to Vanderbilt, it seems. You've looked into other Rex Douglases that don't seem to be the correct one. The Social Security number is fake, as it was recently discovered the last 15 years. So his name, I mean, how sure can we be that Rex Douglas was even his real name? Are there reasons to doubt it? Maybe I'll ask you this. Any record that he ever used another name, maybe by accident or on purpose during let's just say while he was married, anything like that? Did he ever use a different name?
Not that I know of, and I 100% don't think that is his name in any form, because I did a chat with Tennessee Archives, and they couldn't find anyone with that name, any time around those years, and they even searched his grandparents. They couldn't even find a record of what he says were the grandparents' names.
Wow.
So imagine trying to find someone where you don't know what their name is, you don't know their birth date, you don't know where they were born, you really don't know anything about them.
Right. Okay. All right, so we cannot be sure that this is even the guy's real name. I'm now going to his actual background. Did anybody, it seems obviously he had the name Rex Douglas when he met his wife. Did anybody ever come out of his background? How far can we be assured, going back maybe in the 1950s or whatever, that he actually was using the name Rex Douglas? Or does it seem like the name Rex Douglas just magically appears when he marries his wife? Your opinion.
That's a great question, because I was looking again at the archives today. The very first mention of Rex Douglas is his wedding announcement to Ruth. I couldn't find anything before that of Rex Lee Douglas.
Mm-hmm. Now, you did say, though, that somebody introduced him to her. That's how they met?
Yeah, I think he went to, her father pastored a Nazarene church, and I think Rex went there, and that's how they met.
All right, so somebody knew
him.
I will, please.
I will say, in the interviews with Ruth that they did, she seemed to have questioned. She said, he had a mysterious background, and she had never met anyone in his family in 22 years of marriage. And her sister was a librarian. They even tried to verify anything he told them, because he said he grew up in Grundy County, Tennessee, and there was a school fire. Well, she actually found a school fire there, so they were really excited about that. Right. But I don't believe the years would have matched up. I reached out. There's a Grundy County, Tennessee Facebook page. I reached out with the picture and hoping somebody would recognize him, and no one did. And I talked to the guy at the Genealogical Society there, and he only knew of a couple of Douglases in that area, and they weren't named Rex.
Is this something that would have been known well outside the area where it happened? Of course, we have to think in terms of that time, not in 21st century terms. Is that something that would have been known in Illinois, in Indiana, in Missouri? Is that story about this school fire, was it just seemingly contained to that area? Any ideas? Yeah,
that's a good point. You're right. He would have had to have some kind of knowledge or knew somebody from over there, right? Because it wasn't national news. Right. I don't think. Yes.
Right. So that could lead us to.
I did find a mention, but I don't remember what year it was.
Right. So we could, given that this is a story. Once again, in 21st century terms, that would be all over the news, but not back then. It would seem then that he had some connection to that area.
Right. Or, maybe he could have been in the military. I'm not saying he wasn't in the military, because he did have some knowledge, they said. He could have had, a bunkmate or something.
Yeah.
That
right.
we heard talking as well.
Right. Okay. It seems like a little, I guess where we're going with this, it seems a little too tricky to me that, well, I have to build a bio of myself to make it sound real. And then whatever this bio he would build, he would happen upon this story, about this schoolhouse burning down. It seems unlikely. And
he almost gives too many details in the newspaper interview. Well, I went here for a year, then I went here for a year, and then here. It's almost like it was going to be hard to track.
Okay. Did his wife herself, has she ever stated, I did find some discrepancies while they were married, and once again, it seems like he was running the show there, but did she ever find a discrepancy, he said, about anything in his past, and did she ever bring it up to him?
No, and she was just so sweet. And her opinion was she felt that her husband was restless before his disappearance and was asking himself what the future held. She thought maybe he wanted to do something besides ministering, but she didn't know what, and maybe Rex didn't know. So, and she also mentions just a few months earlier, Rex's brother-in-law had died in a car accident. And it was somebody that Rex was very close to. Huh. And he wasn't able to go into the hospital room and tell him goodbye before he passed away of his injuries. So her and her sister Esther wondered if that could have prompted him to think more seriously about what he wanted to do with his life.
And when we say brother-in-law, this would have been Ruth's brother who got killed.
No, I'm sorry. It's Ruth's sister Esther. It would be her husband.
All right. Ruth's sister's husband who got killed.
Yes. Yes, and they all lived in Lyons, and they were all close, the four of them.
Gotcha. All right, so what we're finding out, the story that he was telling people, going back to this article where he was interviewed, this Let's Chat segment, among others, just not verifiable here in the 21st century, certainly to the point that at least 50% of what he said is probably not true, maybe even including his name. And we just have this, going back to his past, seemingly before, he got married, it quickly becomes, a black hole. There's just nothing there.
Right, and it's like he can't keep up with the stories. Maybe he doesn't remember all the stories that he told.
Right. Okay. Now, moving on to some other topics. Who is Joan Roskop? Roskop. Handling his mail. I mean, who is she? How would she even got picked?
That's where it got confusing, because I didn't know if that was the Rex we were looking for or not. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we did try to reach her, and she just didn't respond. I believe we found a Facebook page.
Yeah, but who is she? She was instructed to handle it. I mean, why wouldn't his wife be handling his mail? What exactly? How did her name pop up in his life?
Well, I got the impression that it was a Rex Douglas that they came across when they were investigating.
I gotcha.
So then that's why I wasn't positive if it was the same one. It got so confusing, and there were so many possibilities of people that were brought to their attention. Right.
So what you're saying, this Joan Roskop, she may have nothing to do with this missing Rex guy at all?
Yeah, possibly not, yes.
Okay. All right. How about, is this also a different Rex Douglas or another one? Rex filed a job application, or is this somebody else? What do you know about this as an electrician?
See, I found that really interesting, and I can't really say either way, but I mean, it certainly caught my interest. It's just it just got to be, there were so many things to investigate, and you just kind of had to pick and choose, what you looked into.
All right, so when this thing came up about this job application, of course he goes missing in 84, but this was in 85, so that's probably somebody different, right?
See, I don't know. I tried to reach out to Detective Ainsworth because I think he would have a lot to say, but I just, I sent an email, left a voicemail, and I never heard back. Okay. And I don't believe he works, for them anymore. But
okay, so we're not sure. Once again,
Rex. That's the bad part about 40 years later, trying to dig into stuff.
Right. It's one of those things. Rex Douglas, more of a common name than we might think.
Yes, exactly. Right. And I looked up, Lee Rex Douglas. There's some named Rexley. That's one word.
Right. Right. It's like, I mean, you might know this. How many Heather Grotmans are there in the United States?
I mean, there's one or two, but there's not a ton.
All right, there's not a ton. So it's not like your name. It's certainly not like my name. My dad, I'm Ed Dentzel. My father's Ed Dentzel. We're the only two Ed Denzels on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, my name is way, 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 way less common than Rex Douglas. And maybe Rex isn't a big name that's kids are getting named. But back then it was. Back when he was born, or Rex was a bigger name, 50, 60,
and some of the hits are in Australia. That's a very common name in Australia.
Is
Rex,
it?
Apparently.
All right. Okay. Maybe we've gotten away from it in the United States because I think now these days we associate the name Rex with dogs. You name your dog Rex. You don't name your son Rex. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Just possibly. Okay. All right. You brought it up before. Let's talk about it now. Let's talk about this suitcase. I guess that was eventually found at the St. Louis airport. Go ahead, talking about it, please.
So a year later, airport police or whoever, they actually kind of go through anything that's left behind after a year and they throw it away. And lo and behold, there's Rex Douglas's suitcase. And he disappeared a year earlier. And the police chief in Lyons was really upset. She said she asked the airport police to do a check, in all the lockers. And he basically said he wasn't about to check all the lockers for the suitcase. So, I mean, it was a great clue, but it was a year later. And the only thing in it was, I believe, a shaving kit and some clothes. Some were dirty and some were not. But that's when it was found.
Okay.
When they did the investigation, and this is the part that just completely baffles me, two different people, I guess, had helped. Maybe the person at the airport helped him with the suitcases, said that his suitcase was very heavy. And he told one person that it was books. And this David Tiefenthaler, when he spoke with the police, they said, well, how heavy do you think it was? And he guessed it weighed 70 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. And I told a friend of mine, and she kind of joked, well, what was in there? Gold bars?
Maybe
it was.
Maybe it was. But it wasn't 70 pounds when they eventually found it. It might have been 15 pounds. No, that's what's so crazy.
Whatever was in there, he had taken it out. And we don't know. I mean, we assume that the suitcase was there the whole time, but I mean, he could have brought it back a day or two later, or somebody could have.
Right.
Since they didn't do a thorough investigation, I mean, search of the airport, we don't know when it was actually put there.
Right, but it's there. Nobody denies that it's his.
Yeah, and they shipped it back to Ruth, and then a little bit later even, Detective Ainsworth wanted to make sure he had a legitimate DNA source for Rex, and found a shaver, and went ahead and took the shaver, and they're assuming the hair in the shaver belongs to Rex. And that's the only DNA source I believe they even have for him.
So this is really the only thing that was left behind from his disappearance, this suitcase.
Right, and there was nothing noteworthy in it at all.
Okay. What about the DNA? DNA, what do we know about the status of the DNA in 2026? Were they able to get something that might be viable?
Yes, they were, and that would be very helpful, that what came up in 2015, because they did have a DNA sample for Rex on file.
Okay. All right, so maybe that is how eventually this is one way that this could get resolved. All right, so we have this suitcase, and if the police had done, the airport police had done a better job, it would have been found a lot sooner. You said it took a while.
Yeah, a full year.
Wow. Okay. What about the stuff at Rex's house? Once he goes missing and his wife's waiting for him to come back, eventually, you got to start organizing, cleaning things up. I don't know if she got married again. Did she move out of this house? I'm guessing she did, given that was like probably the house connected to the church. Maybe she had to move on. Any stories about things that she didn't expect to find? Anything in the possessions of his that couldn't be explained? Anything like that?
No, but I do want to talk about Ruth because I called the church where Rex pastored, and someone answered, and I just wanted to talk to someone about this case, and he actually gave me the number, and it was Ruth Douglas's caretaker. Now, as far as I know, Ruth Douglas turned 100 years old in December.
Wow.
As of October, she was well. She's just a very sweet, lovely woman. I spoke with her caretaker. We decided I didn't really want to interview her. I mean, I knew this would upset her. She said that she does still keep some of Rex's things. She does get emotional still sometimes, talking about him. And because if she was going to be open to it, the caretaker was going to ask her a couple of questions, but she really felt like it would upset her too much.
Right. Of course.
So, but she did not get remarried. And I mean, honestly, I think she's the only victim in this whole case.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, happy that she has lived a long life, but yeah, at some point it's just a little hard to talk about that.
Yeah, because I mean, we don't even know if they were technically legally married. If everything is false on his part on the marriage certificate,
right?
We don't even know if Rex had a family before. When they got married, he was according to him, about 39 years old. So we don't know anything about the first 39 years of his life.
Easily, right? Could have been,
right.
So what we're saying is, though, if there was anything suspicious or anything, we don't know about it. Somebody starts going through his stuff and finds stuff labeled John Smith or something like that. Nothing like that.
No, and sadly, a few years back, there was a flood, and she did lose, a lot of things that belonged to Rex in the flood.
Okay. But we should reiterate something going back to his work, whatever he was, the main reason he was in Missouri, is it does seem that the land deal part of this trip was legitimate.
Yes, correct.
Whoever he said he was going to meet regarding this land in Missouri, he met these people.
Right, because, you have to know what county. So I got lucky, and Dent County did have some paperwork with their names. So I was able to find out who purchased one of the lots. And I phoned her, and she talked to me, and she did remember, buying the land.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at least that part of this was legitimate. Everything else, we have no explanation.
You're right. And she said she never saw Rex. It was, just the realtors.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Some years at some point, an unidentified body was found. It had a guy, had suffered a bullet wound or a couple bullet wounds, or it was a shotgun to the back of the head, and this body went unidentified for a while. It was eventually discovered that this guy was Jack Langeneckert, and you wrote about this, of course, in your article. What can you say about this?
Well, when they first had the John Doe, they were excited. They thought maybe they'd found Rex.
Okay.
So they had to exhume John Doe to get a sample and, compared it with Rex. It was not a match. Mm-hmm. So about just shy of 40 years later, so in 2023, thanks to genetic genealogy, they were able to identify this guy as Jack Langeneckert. He was a 50-year-old real estate agent in the St. Louis area. But what's interesting is he disappeared 2 years earlier in 1982. So he disappeared within a month, give or take, after Rex went missing. But they don't think the body, they think that the body had been there for 6 months, which if that's true, he lived 2 years after he went missing.
Now, I just want to get what you, all right, so Rex goes missing in 1984.
Yeah, the end of January, and
84.
Jack goes missing March 10th of 1982.
All right.
And his body was found June of 84, and they estimated that it only had been there 6 months.
Huh. That is weird. Where was this body before that?
Exactly. But that made me think, could he have lived on the, he ran away because he wanted to, I believe. Did he live 2 years, under the radar before he was murdered?
I don't know. But they for a while thought that this was Rex. Of course, it did not end up being Rex, and it took quite a while for... What year was Jack finally identified?
In 2023.
Wow, long. 40 years it took.
Yeah, and it seemed like he wasn't really, the most upstanding guy either, because they talked to him, because he was never reported missing as far as I know.
Right.
But they did find out that he had stolen money, the family stocks from his mother and his sister, and he emptied out his mother's bank account right before he went missing.
Wow. Yeah, the only thing that, just doing a quick newspapers.com search, all I found was something from maybe the late 70s or something about him being in real estate. That was about it.
Right, and then I Googled and I found this where he was being sued along with 3 other people by a bank. I think it was a $20,000 loan that was supposed to be for restaurant equipment. And they lost, and they appealed, and he went missing the day before the appeal was denied. Literally the day before.
Okay. And he was murdered, and to this day, the murder is still unsolved.
Correct.
Any possibility, given that this guy was murdered in, is from the St. Louis area, of course, a couple years before Rex was there, any chance that Rex Douglas and this Jack Langeneckert guy ever crossed paths back in 1982? Or, being that Rex was doing land deals and bought some land and Jack was in the real estate business, any chance these two could have crossed paths?
I think so. I think that's really interesting. I would like to know if David Tiefenthaler, which was Rex's realtor, if he knew Jack Langeneckert.
Right.
And I will say Jack Langeneckert's car was found at the airport, the same airport that Rex's suitcase was found.
Exactly. What are the odds of that?
Yeah. So it's an interesting possible connection, I think.
I agree. I agree with that. And, I'm usually not into such things, but that does catch my attention. What also caught my attention was that the police, when they wanted to exhume this unidentified remains to take DNA from it, and that's eventually how Jack was eventually identified, the police in Missouri wanted nothing to do with this.
Oh, yeah, that got pretty deep, talking about the land mafia and things like that.
Right. Yeah, because allegedly this could be associated with some powerful family in the area. So even the police in the 21st century wanted nothing to do with it. That is disgusting.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
This is more like a novel. I mean, there's just so many little twists and turns, especially once you get to St. Louis. And I will say that Ruth said that Rex hated St. Louis. He wouldn't have been there any longer than he had to be.
Okay. Well, we just can't believe anything that Rex says, right? Though,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
If so I don't know what that means. I don't know. We have to take that with a grain of salt.
There's one thing that I don't really understand is for 22 years, he moved all the time, and Ruth always willingly moved with him.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, okay, what was different this time? Why did he leave her behind? Had to have been something bigger than him just being restless.
I don't know. This is one of those things, of course, this is so long ago. Maybe we would need to know more about his interactions with others at other church, wherever states they were, what other congregations he was running and everything. You'd need to know a little more about that. I
do want to mention that they did talk to a couple that knew him in Iowa, and they said, he was pleasant. They only knew him from a pastor standpoint, but he did tell someone over there that he worked for the government. And that was why he had didn't have, the Social Security number was a little bit off. He'd been working for the government, and what he implied was a classified project. They gave him a new Social Security number.
He had a story for everything, Heather.
Yes, he does. And all those military records, they got burned up in that fire, too.
Just the most unluckiest guy alive. More people try to determine who he actually is. He has a story. Oh, well, that got burned and, all this stuff. And, I had to get a new Social Security number. He had a story for everything.
Yes.
Regarding his church, after he disappeared, were any irregularities found?
No, I asked, and there's just, they were sad, and they had, they call them supply pastors come, and I think about maybe a year later, they finally replaced him.
Okay. So it wasn't like he ran off because he bled the church. He didn't run off because he bled the church dry.
Right, and I thought about that when I found out they hired a PI right away, but the PI could find nothing. He couldn't find Rex either. This was right after he went missing.
Yeah, well, my opinion on private investigators, no wonder. That doesn't surprise me at all. Okay.
And there was no paper trail to follow in this case. I mean,
right.
When you make up every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to so there's a lot more detail. Once again, go to lostandfoundblogs.com to check out the work Heather's done with a lot more technicalities, more down in depth. You can see a lot more stuff there. And yes, there is a lot more than what we've discussed. Let's just now go to a little bit of analysis between you and I, Heather. Of course, I don't do this with family members and everything. Only when you and a couple other people are on, do I get into theories and kind of stepping, let's say, into a couple of rabbit holes. First, what do you, as best as you can tell, what is the leading theory from the police point of view?
I never really even got an idea. I know that, Ainsworth clearly was suspicious because all he did was try to verify everything. So I do believe that they think that, Rex left willingly.
All right, so that you would say that the police think this was a voluntary disappearance, not foul play.
Yes.
Okay. Is this kind of like the opposite of Kenneth Playstead? Of course, Kenneth, a guy with real ID, probably ran off and got a fake one. Could Rex's be guy with fake ID goes and gets another fake one? Is that what we're looking at here? Very possibly.
Yes, I think so. And with Playstead, it was already starting to show the improprieties with the money. But with Rex, we really just don't really know why he decided to leave.
Mm-hmm. All right, so maybe that's, if people want to think about it, if you know about Kenneth Playstead, the last time Heather joined us, he was a guy, his name really was Kenneth Playstead, but then seemingly, I think Heather and I both believe that he ran off and with some money, maybe to start a new life somewhere. Maybe when, with Rex Douglas, when his wife, encountered him, he was already, living, under a fake ID, maybe.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you did say, let's move on to this. Speaking of another life, of course, we're not quite sure how old he was, but, given those years he was married to Ruth, is there any possibility that he did have another family going on or something like that?
Yes, definitely. And when we found out that he went back to Des Moines, I wondered if he was, had a girlfriend there even. Because he would always have an excuse to go back to Des Moines. They had a lot of friends and family there, church people. So Ruth wouldn't be questioning if he went there.
Right. As best as you can tell, how much traveling was he doing by himself?
See, that's the big question. I would like to know that because you had a great question in the outline is, do we have enough time to have another family?
Right.
I just feel like Ruth wouldn't have questioned anything, and because he's just restless and he's impulsive. So if he wants to just up and leave for the week, well, that's just how he is.
Right. She would have just bought into anything he said.
Right, because think of a typical wife, what she would say 22 years later if their husband left, and she always puts it very nicely. Well, I think he was restless. Wanted another career. I mean, that's really making him sound a lot better than he is.
Okay. All right. So I guess we're saying maybe given the attitude of his wife, her demeanor within their marriage, it is possible that somehow he was juggling two marriages or something.
Yeah, or at least, a girlfriend or, a secret life. It would be easy given the fact that they moved every couple of years. And I think he could have hid that pretty well.
Okay. We've talked about this. Let's talk about again in the near future. Was there anything that coming up that would have put him in a difficult position? Maybe this whole thing about the taxes. Is that the way you view that?
I actually think I just think the walls were closing in on him. Maybe some things we don't know, but he was 61, so pretty soon he was going to have to submit all the right paperwork to start getting Social Security. His valid, his actual name, everything to back it up. And I think that was, a big factor, in my opinion.
Okay. DNA and fingerprints. Do we have any, of course you talked about the shaving stuff, the DNA, any fingerprints that were saved from his stuff? Maybe from the suitcase or from the house or anything?
See, I'm not sure, and NAMUS might have that, but I think it would have been really easy because he did go into Rex's house and, she let him have whatever he needed. So I'm sure they could have got fingerprints easy enough. She actually had kept the suitcase still full of everything that he left. And she took the clothes out and laundered them and then put them back in the suitcase, kind of sad. And then they were still sitting there at the house.
Right.
All those years later.
All right. So we do have some scientific evidence. If anything should arise, with DNA or whatever, if remains are found or something like that, there still is hope all these years later. And of course, although it's been 40-some years, we know that cases that are a lot older than that have been solved this way. For example, Mary Jane Van Gilder.
Like genetic genealogy,
Yeah.
They could take a crack at this case.
Right. Could this be like Ray Griecar, of course, the lawyer who went missing in Pennsylvania? I happen to believe that he was going through some sort of midlife crisis or something like that and took off, maybe suicide or something. Any signs that Rex's disappearance could be like that?
I don't really think he went and harmed himself because I don't think he would have been getting all the money ready.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I agree with you about Ray Gar.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't believe the outcome was the same.
Right. Okay. So we're not thinking that Rex was suicidal. It was more, maybe, it's just a theory, that maybe it had to do with his taxes or something, and he was going to be exposed. And so, he took off, but not to the point where he thought, well, I got to off myself.
Right, because if it was discovered his identity was fake, he would have lost his job. He would have completely lost his reputation.
Right.
And Ruth just adored him. She would have found out.
Right.
That his whole life was a lie. So.
Right, and there might have been jail time too.
Right.
Maybe. Who knows what he might have done, things he might have signed, and things he might have faked, in keeping up this Rex, this identity of Rex Douglas that I think we have a good reason to believe was not his real name, at least not first name. Has anybody ever looked into the...
He owed the IRS at least some money. I mean, we don't know how much, but I think that's a pretty, safe bet.
Okay. Has anybody looked into the possibility that he was an escaped convict? Some guy who busted out of prison and was able to start his life over? Anything like that?
See, I'm not sure. I mean, it's possible. And Sylvie was pretty comprehensive with her article, and she actually even flew to Missouri and interviewed people. Mm-hmm. But no, I haven't really heard much about, people digging into that. I don't even know what year you would have to start, doing that. Maybe in the 1950s, maybe. Would you have to go back to the 40s? But I think, or any guy that skipped out on bail or escaped from some prison and would be very motivated to start a new identity and things like, something like that. And I actually found an article about a sailor named Rex Lee Douglas that gave that as his name, and I think he stole a cab or something, but the article was from the 50s, and he would have been, in his 30s, and this sailor was 18, but, exact same name.
Mm-hmm. When people were around him, of course, as you know, of course, we have listeners outside the United States, but of course, we have a, rich differences in the English language in the United States. A lot of different slang, a lot of different accents. And did anybody ever get the idea from the way he talked or anything that, of course he said he was from Tennessee or whatever, that maybe his accent was more from like the Northwest, or it was from like Minnesota, Minnesota nice, or, or did he sound like he belonged in Missouri or wherever?
No, it's an interesting question, but no one ever really said anything. He just seemed to be like fly under the radar. No one seemed to really have any, anything noteworthy to say about him. Just he seemed nice.
And in your reading and everything, people you talked to, did he ever seem to have any skills or things like that maybe seemed outside what he gave as his background?
Well, he did tell his wife he did some contracting, and I know he worked on his sister and brother-in-law's house for a while. Mm-hmm. But there were a couple of people, I talked to some people, and, well, so-and-so knew them, I'll see if they want to talk to you. And the answer was always no. So it's like anybody that actually knew him didn't really want to talk. But I kind of get that, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just like I said, sometimes you can maybe expose somebody who, is withholding on their background if, they give you one story about their background and then something pops up, like somebody has to show a unique skill or unique something like that, fix something, build something, and all of a sudden they seem like they're a genius. And it's like, well, how did that happen?
A couple of things that stood out as far as, like, he was in an accident and he had to have his cheek reconstructed.
Uh-huh.
Something else I noticed in the missing person websites, the amputation of the tip of the middle finger of his left hand. That might make, a John Doe or something.
Right.
Easy. I didn't.
Right. And this happened after, while he was Rex Douglas.
And see, that's just it. There's no mention of how this happened. And not even Ruth talking about it with the police.
Okay. So that's something that could have happened before he got married. This was not something seemingly that happened after he got married where his wife would be able to verify how it happened.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. And, of course, he was prominent. Regarding this cheek issue, I'm wondering if it would have been enough to alter his appearance to the point that nobody would recognize him, or people from
the
music.
Pictures. There's only a couple of pictures out there, but they're so grainy you really can't even pick up on, the scar.
Yeah, I guess I might use the example. One that maybe a lot of people know is Jennifer Grey. Of course, she was in Dirty Dancing. She was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and of course, prominent actress, mid 80s, and then once she went and got a nose job, and then suddenly nobody recognized her. All it took was that, and she became a nobody overnight. In fact, people, when she appears in Friends a couple times, I think most people watch it don't even know that is she in the couple episodes. I guess that's what I'm saying is, could he have had something done, even if it was due to an accident, that could have altered his appearance to the point that nobody would know him?
Yeah.
It's just an idea. Okay.
Yeah.
So is this something you're still waiting for more information? Do you have feelers out for people to contact you with more information regarding Rex's disappearance, or what? Where does it stand now in your life, Heather?
I haven't really done anything. I mean, Sylvia and I are both kind of looking into it. But I mean, a lot of times after I'll post something, even months later, people will contact me. So I'm still hopeful for that.
Mm-hmm. What is, if you could speak for Sylvia, what does she think about all this?
She's just not sure. I mean, like I said, she just did an exhaustive search, and listening to my podcast, and I kind of, got her interested again. I sent her the police file, and so I believe she even met with Boulder County, the DA, and they were still optimistic. They would still love to, if anything comes to them, still like a resolution to this case. So they haven't forgotten about it.
Okay. What is your best guess as to who Rex Douglas really was? Your best guess.
Well, someone made the theory that, he worked at this homeless shelter in Iowa. My friend Clint said, well, maybe he was one of the homeless at some point. I mean, I think he didn't have much of a family growing up, and he probably got passed around. So I think it just kind of went from there, and he just kind of stumbled into, being a preacher and a pastor, and it worked for a while, and then he wanted to move on and do something else.
Okay. Being that I brought up the example Lori Ruff earlier in our talk here tonight, it's obvious to me, at least from that one, and everybody can look that her case up. For example, it's a long article on Wikipedia about it. Or a lot of people have done a lot of coverage of what happened to her. But it was obvious to me that the reason she got away with what she did, leaving home, stealing a dead baby's identity, and changing her name, and getting married and everything, is because her disappearance, nobody filed a missing persons report for her. She took off, she wasn't happy at home, and her family just let her go. So there were no pictures out there. There were no articles about her. She wasn't, her original ID and everything wasn't on, NAMUS. This might have been before NAMUS, but I think you understand, everybody understands what I'm saying. And I'm wondering maybe with Rex Douglas, it's kind of the same thing, that maybe he got away with this if he wasn't really Rex Douglas is because he simply left home and nobody bothered to really do anything about it.
Right, and one of the police in Missouri just kind of said, well, a lot of times the troublemaker kids, they get sent to live with other family members, and kind of speculated, maybe that was what happened with Rex.
Right. And of course, if he really was born back in the 1920s and then growing up through the Depression, different world than the one we live in now.
Right, and his family, they could have died even,
Right.
when he was young.
Right. Okay. So, what do you have coming up, Heather, if you can talk about when is your next article going to be out? Maybe you want to give foreshadowing of that.
Okay, well, Unsolved Mysteries fans are going to love this because Sunday we're going to talk about Clarence Roberts, and he's, of course, the man who died twice. And that was the Unsolved Mysteries segment. And then early May, around the anniversary of my blog, I like to do something special. And my friend Eric Walter is going to join me and going to talk about Keith Reinhardt because he spent years on that case, and he's going to tell us a lot of things that weren't in the Unsolved Mystery segment.
And just if anybody's on, the man that died twice, just very quickly in a couple sentences, please explain that.
He was at the brink of financial ruin. There was a fire on the property of his, a barn burned, and there was a body inside. They all figured maybe it was him. Blood types didn't match up. They were kind of suspicious. So they actually eventually even put out a warrant for murder because they thought he killed this man. And 10 years later, his wife's house she was living in burned, and there was another body in there, and that was thought to be Clarence also. So he's died twice in 2 house fires. And
was he in the second one?
Yes, we pretty much,
okay,
as best we can tell. But I actually found an article, and I found out who was in the first fire, I believe, and that's not widely known.
All right, so this is coming out soon.
Yeah, that'll come out Sunday. Clarence Roberts.
Being that you got to give a date. What date? Being this won't be coming out for a couple weeks.
The 26th of April.
All right, so by the time this is going to come out after that, so this is something everybody go to Heather's site because it's already out. Go check that out. You said Keith Reinhardt?
Yes, Unsolved Mysteries segment where he goes up into the mountains and never comes back out.
That name sounds familiar to me.
Silver Plume, Colorado.
I think I've read about that. That name is very familiar to me. Okay. Well, tell everybody, once again, give the name of your website, the podcast. Are you on X or Instagram, all of that? Give it social media appearances, locations right now, if you could, Heather.
Okay, the website is Lost and Found Blogs. It's LOSTNFOUNDBLOGS. And the most recent 5 podcasts are right there on the top of the page. Okay. Or the podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all the YouTube, all the main ones. And I'm on Facebook, X, and Instagram under Lost and Found Blogs.
Okay. Well, Heather, as usual, it's been an experience. Always love having you on. You do such thorough work. You find these disappearances that are, even in my world, what I would call quirky. And you bring some of them to Unfound, and I deeply appreciate you doing that. And of course, maybe even more so, just the high quality that you bring and professionalism that you bring to the true crime community. So it's been a pleasure having you on tonight.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you. You've always been so supportive of me, so I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
And that was my April 21st, 2026 interview with Heather Grotman, creator of the Lost and Found blogs. I thank her for joining me and all of you for the 6th time. That's a record. So, how to analyze Rex's case? The tough part is that Rex Douglas could have been Rex Douglas, but he wasn't in the military and he did not attend Vanderbilt. Or he was a military vet and a Vanderbilt student, but his name was not Rex Douglas. Or he wasn't Rex Douglas and he wasn't a military vet or a student at Vanderbilt. Really, all these decades later, it's hard to tell which is the best choice of the three. All we can say for sure is that there is no Rex Douglas who had the background that Pastor Rex Douglas insisted he had. Is that all confusing enough for all of you? But the reason we're here is for his disappearance. And I don't think there is much of a challenge to think that Rex, or whoever he was, planned or caused his own disappearance. Then why would he do that? Well, we have a case in Unfound's catalog that we can use as a comparison. Mary Jane Van Gilder. She left her life by choice. There is no doubt. On top of that, we now have a pretty good idea why she did so. Her home life in West Virginia wasn't that great. Her husband was abusive, and Mary Jane fell in love with her supervisor in Ohio. It's not moral. I don't recommend it, but I think we can understand it. For Rex, whether he was really Rex Douglas in name or not, the tough part is figuring out why he chose to leave when he did. If he really wasn't Rex, there's no information saying that somebody had figured his fake identity out. And unlike, say, Kenneth Playstead, nothing arose after Rex disappeared that he had mismanaged church money. And there were no other criminal charges pending against him. Likewise, my perception is that Rex wasn't living a double life, as if he had his wife in Colorado, but then he had a wife and maybe children in Missouri or Iowa or anywhere else. I think there is very little chance of that. Well, then maybe it was as his wife said. Rex had become bored and restless. So just as he had left something behind in the 50s to become a preacher named Rex Douglas, he left Rex Douglas behind in January 1984 to try something new. Then who was he? Really? Hard to tell. I will say this, whoever he was, Rex Douglas was not necessarily a bad guy. Sure, he left his wife without an explanation, that's bad. But to run churches for over 2 decades without a lot of pay, with no allegations of mismanagement, listening to people's problems, praying for them, leading them every Sunday, once again for not a lot of pay, unlike many megachurch pastors today, what Rex did takes a special person. Not a perfect one, but a special one. And that's not holy smoke. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of Rex Douglas, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, sign up, and partake in the Unfound blog. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.